English 1-on-1. In this video, we will talk about types of dependent clauses, noun, adjective, and adverb clauses. Now, before we continue, I would like to remind you the formula of the dependent clause. Like any clause, it contains a subject and a verb, and what makes this clause dependent is a subordinator. Now, there are three types of subordinators: noun subordinators, adjective subordinators, and adverb subordinators. Therefore, there are three types of dependent clauses. In this video, we will start with noun dependent clauses. And in part 1, we'll talk about how to recognize a noun dependent clause, how to make a noun dependent clause, and why study noun clauses. I'm going to start with a function of nouns in a sentence. As you know, nouns can be subjects in a sentence. For example, his behavior shocked his friends. In this sentence, behavior is the subject. Now, if you look at the noun clause, a noun clause can also be a subject in a sentence. For example, what Billy did shocked his friends. In this sentence, you have a dependent clause, which is the subject in the sentence, and the dependent clause is what Billy did. What is the subordinator, Billy is the subject, and did is the verb. So noun clauses have the same function in the sentence like any noun. It could be a subject, and it can be an object. In the sentence, I know your address, address is a direct object here. And the same applies to the noun clauses. I know, and now you have the object where you live. I know where you live has an independent clause, I know, and dependent clause where you live. In this case, the dependent clause where you live is the object. Also, nouns are located as, if it's a subject, located before the verb. For example, his behavior shocked his friend. So when we talk about noun clauses, it's very important to recognize the location of noun clauses, because a noun clause can be a subject. It will be always located before the verb. Now, if it's an object, it will always be located after the verb. So the location is the second factor we'll consider when we are learning about noun clauses and how to find them in a sentence. So I know where you live. Where you live is located right after the verb know. Also, the third location of nouns is after prepositions. You are responsible for your actions. In this sentence, actions is a noun, and it's placed after the preposition for. And the noun clause, what you did, is also located after preposition for. You're responsible for what you did. The third important factor to consider when we're dealing with noun clauses is questions. Like nouns answer questions what and who, noun clauses have the same questions. For example, what shocked his friends? And the answer is going to be a noun. His behavior shocked his friends. What shocked his friends? What Billy did shocked his friends. Who had fun? My friends had fun. Or whoever came to my party had fun. Let's take a second here to look at this sentence. Whoever came to my party is a dependent clause because you have whoever as a subordinator and the subject in the sentence. It comes with the verb came. So you have a dependent clause. And this dependent clause is located right before the verb had. So you have subject and the verb, and your subject is a dependent clause. So if you are not sure if it's a noun clause or an adjective clause or an adverb clause, you can always ask a question. In this sentence would be question who. Who had fun? What do you know? I know your address. What do you know? I know where you live. Once again, when you examine the dependent clause where you live, you can say that this clause is located right after the verb know. Therefore, it's an object. It can answer question what. I know where you live. What do you know? I know where you live. And any noun clause can be replaced by a noun. So you can say, if we go back to the first sentence, what Billy did can be replaced by his action or behavior. The whole clause can be replaced by one noun. Whoever came to my party can be replaced by one noun or a pronoun. You can say friends or we or they. I know what. Where you live can be replaced by one noun or pronoun. You can say I know your address or I know it. What are you responsible for? You're responsible for your actions. What are you responsible for? You're responsible for what you did. Once again, when you're dealing with noun clauses, you consider three aspects. You always think about the function, if it's a subject or an object, the location, if it's located before or after the verb or after a preposition, and you always verify with questions, who or what. How do we make noun clauses? The first way to make a noun clause is combining two independent clauses, two statements. For example, I know, or I know something, or I know it, and he can swim. So you combine two independent clauses in one sentence where one of them becomes a dependent clause because we add a subordinator. I know. What do you know? I know that he can swim. The second way to make a noun clause is, again, when you have one independent clause and a yes or no question. For example, I don't know, and yes or no question is, can he swim? The reason we call them a yes or no question is because the answer will be yes, he can, or no, he cannot. So when we're working with yes or no question, your subordinator will be if or whether. I don't know if he can swim or whether he can swim. And the third way to make a noun clause is connecting one independent clause with the WH question. I know. Where does he swim? So in this sentence, where does he swim is an independent clause. Now, if you're making this a dependent clause, your question word where becomes a subordinator. And so you have it. I know where he swims. Why study noun clauses? Well, to avoid several mistakes. Let's talk about the first common mistake. When you make a sentence and you tend to repeat your objects or subjects. For example, that he can swim well, I know that. Well, that is incorrect because now you're repeating this dependent clause with replacing it by that. So instead, you can just say, I know that he can swim well. That he can swim well is fantastic. So you're looking at this part of the sentence. This is your dependent clause, and it could serve as the subject here. But because we don't really know sometimes these rules, we introduce the second subject. So you're either using two objects, the same objects, or, which is redundant, or two subjects. So instead, you would say, that he can swim well is fantastic. So that he can swim well is your subject. What is fantastic? You can say it is fantastic, but if you want to develop the idea, and you just say that he can swim well is fantastic. The second common mistake is a question order in noun clauses. So it is incorrect to say, I know where can he swim. Remember earlier we said where can he swim is an independent clause, it's a question. So when you convert this clause into dependent, we get rid of the question order and simply say, I know where he can swim. So these are the two mistakes. are very common in students' writing. And if you know noun clauses and how to form them and how to recognize them, hopefully you will avoid making these two common mistakes.